Over the next few episodes, we're going to explore some triangle relationships in our internal lives. The first is the body, mind, and spirit love triangle. The other is the what, how, and why triangle. Both form a bit of a love triangle if we cultivate them to work together for our good. And when we begin to master these, we begin to thrive in our everyday lives, and this leads to improved personal success. In these next few episodes, we'll explore this love triangle from the perspective of how muscle memory and unity empower us and fuel our self-love. Today, we'll look at what happens to our body, mind, and spirit experience when we neglect that triangulation, and we'll tap into some simple principles to unify this love triangle as we strengthen the connections between them. Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence but feel stuck in a fog of uncertainty? If you're ready to gain clarity on your goals and cut yourself free from the fear, self-doubt, and worry holding you back, this show is for you. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and clarity coach. I help women like you restore their inner worlds and get clear on their goals to confidently fulfill their greatest desires. Ready to restore your inner warrior? Then turn off those distractions and tune in to this next episode. So let's dive in. I mentioned that we'd explore the what, how, and why triangle in the coming weeks, but I want to establish what this is exactly because there's some crossover into the mind, body, and spirit concept. Many times we feel like we're in a fog because we don't seek to understand. We may know what to do, but beyond that, we don't have a clue. We don't seek to understand how and why things work in our body, mind, and spirit, and how these work together. We don't seek to understand how and why things work certain ways. We don't seek to understand how and why things have to be done certain ways for optimal performance or success. And then, even worse, we don't seek to understand how and why things should be done in the first place. This lack of understanding literally is the thing in the way of us achieving our goals and personal success. We settle into a simple life of moving through the motions, those what elements, and wonder why our lives feel like they're playing out in black and white instead of in full color. I'm baffled by how many people don't concern themselves with this vital part of the equation. Neurologically, our brains have been designed and hardwired with a curiosity to understand and make meanings out of messages and interactions. So even biblical texts are encoded with parables and anecdotes that invite us to interpret them and explore how and why to understand them. Modern times, with the help of AI, are literally changing the ways our neurological networks develop from childhood through adult life. So it's dumbing us down at alarming rates. And I know you've heard that there's been Google studies and whatnot that I have even talked about in previous episodes where we're being dumbed down by just search engines, by quickly just searching something, getting the quick answer, not giving our brains an opportunity to kind of come up with the answers ourselves or to lead us into the right directions ourselves. But it's also contributing to the brain rot in developmental years that won't be reversible. So I'm going to get a little bit of science geeky here. And I'm going to tell you about my very first book editing experience where I got to be on this team of doctors and scientists and people doing this really cool research project. So the name of the book is called Inside the Brain, and it came out years ago. But the really cool thing was I was working in an office at the time, and one of the agents that worked there, one of the brokers, he came up to me. He was always asking me for help, like editing letters and things like that and writing letters. And so he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I've got this really amazing project and I think you would be perfect for it." And he just brought me into the fold, and it was a really cool experience because these individual doctors and researchers were working out of the University of Wisconsin, and they were traveling to Romania and they were studying the early childhood development of brains, in particular these individuals who were in orphanages. So babies who were in orphanages, they were studying their brain development and lack of brain development. Then they were comparing these to the healthy development of a baby brain. And so I got to be a part of this really cool experience and learn some really nerdy things about our brains, but I want to bring some of them to you today because I want to build a foundation on what I want to talk to you about over the next few episodes. So there are really interesting ways that our neurological networks start to form in our early childhood. Brains have a fascinating architecture that works kind of like a computer operating system. We're born with trillions of neurons, and they're kind of like these nodes, and they're just floating around, and they don't really have any type of structure or anything meaningful to attach onto yet. During our developmental years, our brains then build a network, and it's made up of network hubs, connections, and then neurons that comprise this really intricate circuit. So, from birth to age 3, our brains have the capacity to form about 1 billion neural connections each second. That's pretty impressive. By the age of 3, a healthy brain holds over 1,000 trillion neural connections. That translates to between 80 to 97% of our brain's development by age 3. So while our neural connections can keep developing over our lifetime, our network hubs finish forming by the age of 10. So this is something that was a really interesting discovery for me when I was working on this project and reading through just years of research and analysis of these research findings. That the networks are only as good as the foundational hubs put in place in the first decade of life. So when you think about how we're born with all of those trillions of neurons, and they're just kind of like these molecules that are just floating around looking for something to tell it what to do, they need to be programmed, and they kind of need they need places, like they need buildings or hubs to go to. And so you think about these connections are kind of like these veins or these wires that go out and go from the hub to the actual neurons, and they give it the power and they tell it what to do, where to go, and all those different things. I know I'm probably oversimplifying this and not simplifying it quite the right way, but I just want you to get a really simple visual of these 3 different elements or components of what make these up. Because the bottom line is, the thing I want you to understand is, without a type of hub forming, there's nowhere for neurological connections to actually go. So the bottom line is, these intricate networks are what we rely on to complete complex cognitive tasks. So all this brain development talk kind of reminds me of a recent conversation that I had with somebody about AI and the dangers of relying on AI for everything, especially in the developmental years and when we're actually trying to learn and grow as individuals. And so I'm talking to this individual who's in the AI business, and he's like, "It's the future, Jennifer. It's the way of the future. We can't avoid it. We just have to embrace it, and it's going to evolve, and we're going to evolve." And I just kept saying, coming back to this kind of like neurological connection thing, like if we do not develop these hubs, our brains are going to rot. There is a real danger. So something I didn't really elaborate on was that we have these neurological hubs, and if you don't have them, then you do not develop these hubs later on in life. We can develop connections and tell those neurons where to go. So yes, our brains are not done developing in the sense that we continue to grow in knowledge and strengthen these connections to existing hubs. But the emphasis here is, by the age of 10, you're not going to produce any more hubs. That's a pretty big consideration. So when you think about like second language, for instance, so being bilingual, if we do not establish the multilingual hub before the age of 10, we will never fluently learn a second language. It just doesn't work that way. We don't have the hub for those connections to keep building on. So you can learn a different language in the sense that you're memorizing things, but it will not become second nature because you don't have that neurological connection. So I want you to think about how that concept translates into every other area of our brain capacity and of our thinking. So now, coming back to the AI thing, I'm having this conversation and I'm saying, you don't understand, there are things and concepts that we need to learn hands-on, and we need to train our brains in early childhood development. But I'm saying, like, obviously not just 0 to 10, but like the primary and the secondary setting, that We don't want to rely on AI because that's not how these neurological connections will form for us. We don't want to have to keep plugging into some outside source in order to just function. And so I'm going back and forth with this, this individual about there's these real dangers of our minds and spirits going slack from non-use. So even more concerning is what will happen to the next generation if these crucial neurological hubs don't form to begin with. So I don't want to go on a tangent right there because I really want to drill deeper into this non-use aspect. I've been meditating on these neurological hubs and networks all week, actually for 2 weeks since I talked to this individual. And where I've been particularly kind of really wrestling with what am I trying to see here is where our spirituality and emotions are concerned. So our neural networks have these categories, like I mentioned. And the ones that I want to explore here that kind of tie together the mind and the spirit parts are these cognitive, emotional, and social. So I see our spiritual network or hub being a social one. So this is why even if we don't grow up exposed to spirituality and faith, we have a neural network to tap into, to build on. So that's one of those things, because it's a social hub, that we can then send those neural connections to that hub and we can continue to grow and develop in that area.
So I just want to hop in here for a moment and mention that I'm now accepting one-on-one coaching clients. So if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a session with me today. Find a link to book your session in the show notes below.
So the good news is that there's a foundation that we already carry within us to link our spiritual and emotional connections to. The bad news is that we have to do the work to get these connections talking to each other and working in unity. So for the love of God, we need to stop seeking the quickest answers. We need to stop going to the search engine and just typing it in, or, hey Siri, tell me how to solve this thing. Tell me the answer to this. Solve this equation for me. We need to stop doing that. I mean, there's a time and a place to do that, don't get me wrong. But in these areas that I'm talking to you about today, we need to stop seeking that quickest answer. The quickest answer, first of all, isn't always the correct answer. It isn't always the right answer, and it isn't always the best answer. We have to have fun and enjoyment and fulfillment in experiences. This is part of the discovery phase. It's why we're so rewarded when we bring our childlike wonder to an experience. Ever think about when you just go into an experience with just awe and wonder and curiosity, and you just start thinking and getting your hands in there and maybe taking things apart and looking at how they work, why they work certain ways, and just being in wonder and awe about the mysteries of it, but also embracing the discovery process of seeing how those mysteries unfold and how they actually work and come together to work in particular ways. So this is where that how and why concept comes into play. We have to break things apart to see how they're working and why they're working certain ways. So consider how this is working in our mind-spirit connection. These two interconnected parts at work in our inner world at the same time. There's a difference between knowing that these exist and understanding how and why they do. What does it matter if we know something but do not understand it? There are so many inspirational quotes out there about the power of understanding something. That's where we can have knowledge, but when we understand what to do with that knowledge, that's the step into wisdom. So unlike AI, we are not artificial beings. Living our best life isn't about rote memorization and binging and purging info just to get through that moment. There's some times where you're like, okay, I need to know the right answer in order to get to the next step. But we're talking about meaningful engagement. We're talking about that triangulated relationship between the mind, the spirit, and the body, and how those all interconnect and fuel each other. Living our best life is all about meaningful engagement. It's all about personal growth. The human experience is about memorable and enlightening connection. When we understand our emotions, for instance, it helps us navigate experiences better. When we understand our spiritual self, it grounds us to our existence that is outside of ourselves, connected to something larger. When our emotions connect to our spiritual self, we feel that spiritual energy and we see it and begin to experience life in vivid color. We need to fall in love with the process of growing these connections and all that work that goes into the journey itself. Our purpose and passion are centered to this. So, how do we begin to cultivate a better mind spirit relationship? This makes me think of an interesting explanation in the book of Hebrews. And it says, "The word of God is alive and powerful. It's sharper than the sharpest two-edged sword, cutting between soul and spirit, joint and marrow. It exposes our innermost thoughts and desires." And that's what really jumps out at me, that last part there. Our innermost thoughts and desires are exposed. And you can interpret that word of God part in a few ways, and I don't want to digress into that right now. I want to talk about an important connection for me is that there's a promise and saving grace there. And that is my spiritual foundation. So step one is to bring the mind and spirit together in a single act and notice how closely bound together they are. This is what we call practicing mindfulness. So my homework for this week is to either journal or meditate on something you're struggling with. Perhaps it's something you want to change in your life. Pick just one thing though. And it can be something really, really small. And then I want you to do a few things. I want you to note what this is, as well as any ideas you have about why it's a struggle for you and why you want to improve this thing or this area. Then I want you to note an outcome you hope will result from improvement. Note anything you're grateful for in this area or in the intended outcome. So maybe you want to say like, I'm grateful when this manifests itself, when this transpires in my life, when this change occurs. But it could also be things that you're grateful for that are already at work right now. That's usually where I like to start, and that's something that I'm encouraging you to kind of explore. But if you start to get tripped up, you can go ahead and look into the future. Either way or both, they're both my favorite. They'll work. So then I want you to meditate and or pray on it for a few days. So take a few days and I want you to really meditate on just these things. You don't have to move forward, think ahead. Just give yourself time over the next few days just thinking about those particular things, because you'll be amazed at how many things start to come to mind, how many things you start to notice. An interesting thing I'm going to talk about a little bit more next week is how sometimes things become more clear to us when we start to look outside of ourselves, and then we start to hear and see and experience things, and how God and the universe send us clarity and send us information through outside sources. So you think about all the different ways where you receive information through interactions, through engagement with different media sources, through our creativity, through our work experiences, all these different things. Everything's unlimited. It doesn't have to be like a message where you're like, okay. But it's interesting because sometimes we think, like I just had somebody say to me recently how they really struggled to really hear from God. And I was like going through all the different ways that we hear from God is like, okay, maybe it's not this still small voice that you hear in your head or this shouting voice that you hear in your head, like knock it off. Maybe it's speaking through someone else where you've meditated, maybe prayed on something, and then all of a sudden you haven't said it out loud, but all of a sudden you're hearing like an answer or you're hearing a response and you're like, it's coming through a person, or maybe it's coming through a situation, or maybe you've just driven by and you see it on a billboard, but clearly it's speaking into the situation in some way. And that's the mystery of existence. And, you could try to explain that all different ways, but that is that spiritual mind connection kind of coming together. And we have to cultivate this space to allow those things to happen. If you didn't do the exercise of that meditating and trying to bring your thinking and your emotions into this space where you're saying, okay, now enlighten my thinking, give me a better understanding of these emotions. Not every emotion needs to be like worked through and like purged out. We're emotional beings. Emotions are what carry us through the day. They're what define our character. We're not supposed to let certain negative emotions rule our life. That's one thing. But when we talk about our mind, it's this beautiful place, and we're trying to build these great networks and connections. Just like I mentioned when I was talking about those, neural networks and hubs that we're building, is that we're building this beautiful mindscape, and that spiritual connection is a huge part of it. But we can't really tap into the spiritual thing, which again, I'm going to talk about a little bit more next week, if we're not aware of the mind part. So if we don't go through some of that thinking, how will we even know that we're getting any type of spiritual nourishment? How will we know how to apply that, or what its deeper meanings, and take a deeper understanding of it, if we're not doing these particular things? So my mind, spirit, and even body connections really started to get enhanced when I started practicing this mindfulness way of operating, and really trying to get that unity between my mind and spirit. So as you're going through this meditation, in this time of maybe meditation and prayer, I want you to note everything you learn and discern through this meditation and through this time of prayer. Even if you start to hear and notice things happening outside of that meditation, that you start to get clarity and insights and maybe answers or responses, even just note those. You can journal it all out. I know sometimes journaling isn't possible. Sometimes I'll just open up a notes app if I don't have anything that I'm carrying with me, and I'll just note words. Maybe it's just a word or a phrase, and I'll just keep doing that, because these are the things that are going to help you label these emotions, and also any spiritual connections and thoughts that you have. So once you've done this for a few days, see what you come up with, and then I want you to look back on it, and then I want you to find either a word or a phrase that really sums up this outcome that you want. Because remember, we're coming back to, we started with, here's a struggle, and I'm looking to make progress or overcome it, or I want to make a change, whatever that is. Now you're going to come back to it, and you're going to try to sum up the experience over that mindfulness and say, okay, is there a word or a phrase that I could use as like my 2-second, 3-second elevator pitch if I were crossing paths with someone and I say, this is the word of the day, or this is the phrase of the day. Once you have that, I want you to look it up. So that's where I want you to now search. Because searching isn't bad, but we have to have our minds and our spirit wrapped around some things before we just go out there and try to allow outside sources to come in and influence that and start to give us answers and deeper insights and deeper understandings. So now I want you to take that, and I want you to look up, but I want you to look up, don't just haphazardly plug it in. I'm giving you a specific homework. I want you to find one mind spirit practice, an act of love that will help you make progress in this area or struggle. So obviously there's going to be a bonus there if you find something that also factors in the body. And you'll be surprised. There are so many different things out there. You might find several, but I really don't want you to get overwhelmed and try to do too many things at once. I just want to show you how easy it is to just hone in, find one, and then find something that is going to put you on the right path to actually overcoming or dealing with this struggle. And you'll be surprised that not all of them are religious. So if you are living your life and say, I do not want to bring any religious practices into my life, that is fine. I try not to bring religion because it tends to have a lot of legalism with it. That's why you hear me use the word faith and spiritual and spirituality, because that's my relationship. And all the different ways that I cultivate that relationship are often outside of organized religion in the traditional ways. And so I don't want you to think about like, oh, I can't do this because I don't want to bring religion into it. I'm telling you, it's some of the things out there are non-religious. So just be thinking about, there's a lot of nature and natural things that you can start to, that will also be strategies and things that you can do. So don't underestimate all the different things that you're going to find. I don't want you to just do this quick thing. So I want you to think about this, that you have to give yourself a minimum of 10 minutes. If If you have to set a timer, if you have to treat it like work, that's on you. Again, you want to enjoy the process. That's half the battle, is enjoying the process. It's not about like working harder and just working to get things done and, oh, the work, it's so hard. Is that if we even change our mindset on that and say like the work is beneficial, the work brings me more fulfillment, brings me a better life, brings me closer to things that I really, really want, then we change that perspective, and then it doesn't feel so much like work. It just feels like living and living our best life and thriving while we're living our best life. So that's another perspective shift that you can consider also. But I want you to take 10 minutes with this search exercise. And I don't want you to just note the what and the how, but I also want you to note the why. So when you're looking at what's a thing that I can do? What's this one mindfulness act that I can do? This body spirit thing that I can do in an act of self-love and invest in myself to overcome this struggle or to achieve a goal or to achieve this particular outcome. Spend the 10 minutes looking for it. So try to avoid just that AI top, like these are the search results. That's just going all over the place. It's not sorting through what's actually good information and not. Maybe it's a good starting point, but start scrolling through. Go to another page, go however many pages, just reading the quick synopsis of things, opening things up and quickly exiting if it's not what you want. 10 minutes. Give yourself 10 minutes. Everyone has 10 minutes of attention to give something, especially if you're interested in it. So give yourself at least the 10 minutes. I hardly ever only spend the 10 minutes, but I start off saying I'm carving out at least 10 minutes with this. Then you're noting, okay, so what is it that I'm doing? How is it that it's saying that I'm doing it? But you always have to have your focus on the why. And in a couple episodes, we're going to go a lot deeper into that why and how it builds off the how and how that's how we are literally programmed. We are programmed to be curious about the why, and it not only is the way that we learn and retain knowledge, but it is the rationale behind why the heck we're going to go do that thing that we're going to do, why we're going to do it the way it's telling us that we should do it, or the ways that we've experienced are optimal ways. So this all is going to make a little bit more sense and a little bit more sense over the next few episodes. But so ultimately, after you spend that time, whether it's 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it ends up being for you, then I want you to take that first step and try it out. You don't have to have this all mastered, even if it's just like, oh, this is multiple steps, I'm just going to take one step. Take that first step and try something out. So here's the interesting thing. Research shows that it only takes 3 to 4 weeks to develop a new habit. And it only takes a week to develop the muscle memory to sustain developing and establishing a new habit. So by the time we come back together next week, I hope that each of us has created some kind of body, mind, spirit, muscle memory to use as we strive to create positive change in our lives.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, follow my channel and share it with friends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. And if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a one-on-one coaching session with me. Find a link in the show notes below to book a session. And as you go through your week, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.